Throughout my entire life, I always struggled to fit in. I would be the kid who would go around at recess and lunch looking for someone to eat food with. And so I'd go to these different friendship groups only to find myself sitting at the edge of the table, eating in silence while they spoke about parties and girls they were talking to on Snapchat and, just making immature jokes. And I would never relate to them. I would always just sit there feeling invisible. And that's how I lived my entire life until recently. So the other night, me and my mate, we were talking on this grass area outside my church. And so while we were talking to each other, these two girls who I've never met in my life, they approached us and they asked us if we wanted to join their friendship group and get frozen yogurt. And so we're like, oh yeah, sure, like that sounds sick, right? And so me and my mate ended up going, and I remember just during the night while we were just sitting there talking, I remember just being so present in the moment. And while I was talking to all these different people, I was asking them deep questions and I felt like I was like being the extroverted one. And after the night, as me and my mate decided it was time to go, we were walking towards the car park and we ran into the girls who originally invited us. And when we saw them, the girls looked at me and they said, oh, we're just talking about you. And then they said, you have this glowing presence. And I remember my mate was sort of teasing me and saying, oh, I think they like you. And I just shrugged and I just laughed. And I said that because it just felt normal for me now. And now I know you may be thinking I'm bragging, but I'm not saying this to boast. I'm saying this because there is someone watching this who used to be the kid that I was. I would always be the kid who would always sit at the edge and watch everyone else be the life of the party. That's how I used to live my life. And I don't even relate to that version of myself anymore, because I've built a masculine presence that radiates this level of respect. And in this video, I want to share the specific lessons that helped me to go from that kid who was invisible to the guy who now just feels natural and just super comfortable in social situations to the point where other people pick up on it. Right? And before I share the lessons, what actually is masculine presence? Because it sounds like this sort of vague term. But masculine presence is about being still. It's about being so confident and grounded in who you are that you're not sitting there fidgeting and looking all nervous and anxious, and you're just calm, you're just still, you're just present. And this changed my life because it changed the way other people viewed me. And so I want to share the top 5 lessons that have helped me to develop this presence and become someone who demands respect by the way that I live. So the first lesson you need to know is you must build yourself first. So you have to become someone who is worth respecting. Respect is earned, not given. You have to go out and build yourself into a man who commands respect by the way that you live. So you have to do challenging things that require discipline and hard work, that helps you build a life that demands respect. right? So for an example, for me, something that is huge for my life is building a physique, as well as doing things like running and having these disciplined habits. When I started to build myself, right, the physical expression, as well as live a life that requires challenge and grit and discipline, that is when I became more grounded. That is when I became someone who other people could respect by the way that I hold myself, like the standards that I hold myself to. And a lot of us, we think that we will just somehow find respect, like we'll just somehow be respected one day. Just like how I used to be when I would go to these friendship groups and expected them to just welcome me in. But that's not how us humans work. We naturally just respect the guy who is higher up in, the hierarchy. It's just that simple. You have to be someone who has built himself up, and then instead of chasing other people, you start to attract that level of respect. The second piece of advice is you have to carry yourself with a sense of self-assurance. So this is just seen in the posture that you have. Are you relaxed? Do you look like you're comfortable? Do you make strong eye contact with people? You can have a confident smile when you're speaking to people. You can use your hand expressions, and you can be, super expressive when you speak. You almost want to have a self-amusing personality. One where you can literally just make yourself laugh. And that is gonna, when you do these things and you have this self-assurance that comes from your body language and the way that you carry yourself, that is when people will gravitate towards you, because people naturally love being around positive people. And so if you carry yourself like you are just completely comfortable and you're having the best time, people will naturally want to gravitate towards you and listen to the words that you say, because they know that you are a positive, happy, healthy person. Right? So start speaking from your chest more too. Start speaking as if the words that you say carry weight. Just be the man who looks like whatever happens around him, he's in control. And when you radiate that masculine presence, that is when other people take you more seriously. The third piece of advice is to live a life interesting enough for people to want to hear your stories, right? So storytelling is ultimately what captivates people. You are still watching this because you connected with my story. And when you tell stories, when you live a life and you collect these stories, focus on the emotion of the story. So instead of recounting certain facts about, if you go on a holiday, for example, instead of saying, oh, the flight was 8 hours, talk about how the trip made you feel. Were you excited to go on the trip? Were you nervous when you got on a plane for the first time? Share the emotions of the experience that you had. Right? So you want to live a life that you can naturally just share stories that make people want to be interested. And then when you share the stories, speak on the emotions that the story creates. And when you do that, that is when people will gravitate towards you more naturally. Right? And I feel like a lot of people, they they struggle with storytelling because they're so focused on those facts, or they try so hard to come up with something, but they're not actually living the life that you would actually have a good story to tell, right? So before you even enter into a social setting, just live a life where you can share stories naturally that are genuinely interesting, right? So even for me, being able to share that experience of that night the other day, like, that's interesting because it was something that was a bit unexpected, right? And so for you, it doesn't have to be like a massive story, but just go out and live a life where you can share these stories naturally. And then when you are in social situations, that is when you can open up about them and show that you live a life worth listening to. Right, so that's the third point. The fourth way to increase your masculine presence is to improve your mental health. Right? So what I mean by this is you want to be more mindful. When you are mindful, that is when you are so much more present in the moment. Right? So for me, things like meditation and gratitude journaling and, dopamine detoxing, all these self-improvement habits that you hear all the time, actually give them a try. Because when your mind is calm and all these thoughts are out of your mind and you're just still, that is when you can be so much more present. And when you are present, that is when other people will gravitate towards you. Because I'm sure you've been in social situations before where someone is, you're trying to talk to someone and they're busy just looking at their phone. How do you feel when someone's doing that? You feel like they're not giving you their full attention. You kind of feel like, why am I even talking? But when you are around someone who is fully present, who you look at them and they don't even look like they have a single thought in their minds, suddenly that person just became the most interesting person in the room. And that is what happens when you have good mental health, when you are mindful, when you are calm and you are present in the moment. People pick up on that and people gravitate towards people like that. So if you want to become someone who has this masculine presence and who's so much more charismatic, simply just improve your mental health. So like I said, things like meditation, where you just focus on your breath, and every single time you get a distracting thought, you just bring it back to your breath. And if you do that every morning, just for 10 minutes a day, you will be so much more mindful. It's the same with gratitude journaling. Every day, just write 3 things that you're grateful for. 3 things that, if they weren't in your life right now, your life would be worse. Because what that does is it makes you naturally, just automatically, just think of positive things. And like what I said before, someone who is happy, someone who is positive, those are the people that other people want to gravitate towards, because people want to be with happy people. And so when you gratitude journal and you write the things that you're grateful for, your brain just naturally thinks of the positive parts of your life. You just think of, man, I'm so grateful that I have this. Because no one wants to be around people who complain and say, oh, my life sucks. They want to be around people who are genuinely just so happy and so grateful for what they have in life. Right? And the third thing that I said is to dopamine detox. Now, I know this is like one of those things where it's like, yeah, but it's just such a pain, like after a long day at work or something like that, I just want to scroll on my phone. But I've noticed lately that just staying off devices and just staying off like all these modern day things has actually cleared my mind so much. And I've been able to just sit in boredom for like an hour Like, I'm just sitting there and I'm just happy. I'm literally just looking out like an old person. I'm just so happy because I've taken away all these things that usually just give you this brain fog, and you just feel like, oh, you can't even enjoy simple moments anymore. And so dopamine detoxing is a huge way for you to just clear your mind and be able to be so much more present in social situations. And that is so magnetic. Right? And the fifth and final piece of advice I wanted to give is to take a genuine interest in other people. People love talking about themselves. So instead of trying to be the most interesting person in the room and try to, I still think things like telling stories and having this part of yourself that other people care about, like, I think that's good. But to become charismatic, the biggest piece of advice I could give you is to take a genuine interest in other people. People are going to be the most present in a situation when they're talking to you if they're the ones who are talking. Because when they're talking, it requires their brain to think. And so if you want someone else to be present in a situation with you, in a conversation, get them to talk more about themselves. And while you're listening, a key piece of advice is to just try not to think about your response, right? Instead, when you are listening to someone, just be fully present in the moment. Try to resist the temptation to think of your response. And then when they're finally finished talking, it's like you collect all the data of what they just said, and then you generate a response, right? When you do that, people, like I said, when you're present in the moment and you're not thinking about what to say next because you feel like you're so important and everything you say is when you actually take an interest in other people and what they have to say in their story, people will find you so much more magnetic because they connect with the person who makes them feel valued and interested. All right, and so next time you are in a social situation, just try that tip. Try to get other people to talk about themselves and then listen with the intent to listen rather than listen with the intent to respond. If you do that, people will see that you're present, see that you care about what they have to say, and you will just, in a room full of people, you will be the one who they gravitate towards the most. Right? So I hope these lessons have helped you, because these lessons have personally changed my life. As I said, I went from the kid who was invisible, who would always try to fit in with other people. And now, I'm not perfect by any means, but I feel so much more comfortable in social situations. I feel like people just naturally gravitate towards me because of the lessons that I've shared in this video. And so if this video helps you, subscribe to my channel. I help young men to become more masculine and help them to develop internal strength and character. So if you like this video, subscribe, give the video a like, comment and tell me what you thought of the video. I'm always interested to hear what you guys have to say. And then, I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.